Have you ever been stuck in a moment when you thought to yourself, oh no, what am I going to do now? Before my wife, Ashley, and I started dating, we were in the same friend group in college. It was a bigger group. And so we knew each other a little bit, but not super well. We had hung out in this group a handful of times. And so we knew each other a little bit, but not super great. And I'll never forget one of the first times that we hung out, just us. It was early October, and we were getting ready to go home for fall break for a long weekend, and we decided to go on a walk together on campus. And like I said, we had been in the same bigger friend group, but we had never really talked or hung out outside of this group. And so we were nowhere near the quote talking stage. Okay, we were not even scratching the surface of this. But this was kind of what sparked it for us. But anyways, we go on this walk. We walk around and we talk, and then after that, we find a place on campus just to sit and talk some more. And as we're sitting there talking, I get a text from my roommate, and the text said something like, "Hey man, what are you up to?" And normally this is no big deal, right? No big deal, except for in this moment, it was a really big deal. Some of you know this, but my roommate at the time was Ashley's older brother, okay? And so I don't know if you guys share your location with people, like your friends or your family. And so Ashley's older brother had her location, but he also had my location. Okay, and so he saw and he knew that we were together. And so in this moment, I get this text, "Hey man, what are you doing?" And I was like, shoot, what do I do now? How do I respond to this text? I felt like I had a couple different options, but none of them really seemed like a great option in the moment. But have you ever been stuck in a moment like this before? Have you ever been stuck at a crossroads where you feel like you have two different options or two different choices that you can make, but really neither of them feel like a great option? Have you ever had a moment when you know what the right thing to do is, but you don't feel like the right thing is really the one that has the best outcome for you? It's easy to do the right thing when the right thing is easy to do, but it's really hard to do the right thing when the right thing doesn't seem so easy or fun or popular to do. It's hard to do the right thing when it's different from what everyone else is doing. It's hard to do the right thing when it might cost you something or it might hurt you in some way. It's hard to do the right thing when the wrong thing seems so much easier. And even in that moment, you can convince yourself or think, hey, maybe this isn't actually that bad at all. Tonight, we're going to continue in our different series. If you've been with us, week 1, we looked at the story where Daniel and his friends, they refused to eat the king's food. And we talked about how we have a choice. We have a choice that we can either obey God or we can follow the world. Then last week, if you were here, Matt talked about the familiar story where Daniel gets thrown in the lion's den because he prayed when he wasn't supposed to. And we talked about just the importance of prayer and how prayer can actually change you and who you are as a person. Tonight, we're going to look at a story that for some of you might be really familiar, but for others of you, it might be a new story. But we're going to be in Daniel chapter 3, and instead of reading the entire story, I'm just going to summarize it for us. And so, Daniel chapter 3, King Nebuchadnezzar, who, if you remember back to Daniel chapter 1, this is the king that went into Jerusalem, and he conquered it, he took it over, and then he took things and different people with him back to Babylon. It was like a 500-mile walk back to Babylon, where he was king. So King Nebuchadnezzar, he makes this gold statue. Okay, and the gold statue is 90 feet tall. Okay, so we're thinking 9 basketball goals tall, 90 feet tall. It's huge. And then it's 9 feet wide. Okay, so this massive gold statue. And what he does is he forces everyone in this area to bow down to and worship this statue. And so when certain music would play and they would hear these instruments, everyone had to bow down and worship this statue. And anyone that refused to would be thrown into a fiery furnace. Okay, they'd be killed right then and there. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they refused to worship this statue when the music plays because they had decided that they were only going to worship God. Right? They weren't going to worship any idols or any statues. They were only going to worship their God. And when they did this, people noticed. Obviously, right? People noticed that they were not bowing down to King Nebuchadnezzar's statue, and when the people tell King Nebuchadnezzar about this, he flips out. Okay, he's not happy about this. He is not having it, and so he says, "Bring those men to me." And so they bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to King Nebuchadnezzar. And then King Nebuchadnezzar basically gives them one more chance. Okay, so he says, if you bow down, then you're all right. But if you don't bow down, then you're getting thrown into the furnace. Okay, and so he gives them one more chance, and they refuse to do it. They're not going to bow down to this statue. And so King Nebuchadnezzar, he gets so mad that he decides to turn the heat of the furnace up 7 times. So way hotter than it was. And what Daniel 3 tells us is that when they get thrown into the fiery furnace, that the soldiers that were actually throwing them into the furnace actually died because it was that hot. Like they were just getting close to it to throw them in, but it was so hot that they actually died. So they get thrown into the furnace, and then King Nebuchadnezzar sees a 4th man in the fire. And whether it's an angel or something else, he calls for them to come out of the fire, and they come out, and it says that not a hair on their head was singed, no part of their clothing was affected, and they didn't even smell like smoke. Right? So they completely were fine after getting thrown into this furnace. So that's our story for tonight. Now I want to point out a couple things, and I'll read some verses as we go. But the first thing that I want us to understand about this story is that we can be different together. Okay, we can be different together. As I read this chapter, this is really one of the big overarching themes that I see, is that these guys are choosing to be different together. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they are in it together. They are choosing to do this together. They're choosing to stand up for what they believe in together. They're choosing to worship God together. Verse 12 says this, "But these are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, your majesty. They refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the gold statue that you've set up." And so every time they get referred to in this story, it's always the 3 of them. Right? They're doing it together. I love this next verse, verse 16. It says, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, 'O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you.'" And I love this verse because they replied. And I don't know if they're speaking in unison here or if they have a spokesperson, but what I see is that the way that this is written, it communicates to us that they were united in this decision. They were in it together. They were doing it together. And we talk about this a lot, and so I'm going to try not to spend a ton of time on it, but it's so important, and we can't skip it or pass by it. The truth is we have to do life with other people. Right? We have to follow Jesus with other people. Being different, it's hard. Following Jesus is hard. Being a Christian is hard. We have to be friends with the right people. We have to be friends with people that are going to help us move in that direction. And please don't tune out what I'm about to say, because my assumption is that you've heard this from your parents 1,000 times. You've probably heard it from your small group leader. We've talked about it up here, but I encourage you to just hear this in a fresh way. Okay, hear this with a fresh perspective, because I really firmly believe in my heart that who you surround yourself is one of the most important decisions that you can make. Especially as a high school student, who you choose to surround yourself is one of the most important decisions that you can make, because ultimately it's going to change who you are and it's going to shape who you are as a person. 2 weeks ago, the first week of this series, we talked about how what we take in shapes us. Right? The things we listen to, the things we watch, the things we consume, all of that shapes us and changes us and molds us into the person that we're ultimately going to be. But the same is true with the people that we hang out with. The people that we spend the most time with, that we do life with, those people are going to shape us and mold us and change us, and it's either going to be in a positive way or a negative way. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says that bad company corrupts good character. And so if you're surrounded by the wrong people, then I can almost guarantee that it's going to bring you down as well. Last thing about this, and then we'll move on. I want you to think about your 5 closest friends. Okay, your group, your 5 closest friends. Last week, Matt made you choose one best friend, and that got a little awkward and feelings got hurt, so I'm going to let you choose 5 friends tonight. Okay, so you get 5 friends, your 5 closest friends, the people that you spend the most time with, the people that you hang out with the most, the people that on a Friday night you're hanging out with, those people. You will become like those people. You will become like your 5 closest friends. And so if you don't want to talk like or act like or think like or believe like those people, then you probably shouldn't be hanging out with them, because bad company corrupts good character. I've seen this so many times in my own life, with my own friends, with my own classmates and my peers, people that have slowly started to change for the worse just simply because of the people that they're choosing to hang out with. And for you seniors, if I can talk to you for a minute, you are a little more than a semester away from graduating. All right, some of you are going to go to, you're excited about that. Some of you are going to go to college, others of you are not. But really, for the first time in your life, you're going to have the freedom and the opportunity to do what you want, to choose to do and pursue what you want. And one of the most important decisions that you can make in this next season of life is who you're going to surround yourself with. Like, it matters so much. Those people are going to shape you and mold you into who you're becoming. And so who are you going to surround yourself with? Can I encourage you tonight to be different together? Like, do this thing with other people. Surround yourself with people on the same path, running the same race, doing the same thing as you. Here's the second thing that I want us to understand about this story is I want you to choose an even if faith. Okay, an even if faith. This is really what I want the focus of tonight to be on, because this is the part of the story that speaks the loudest, I think. But before we get into that too much, you guys ever have like if-then moments with your friends or your parents? Like, hey man, if you buy me Taco Bell this time, then I'll get you next time. Or hey, if you give me that homework this time, then that next time I got you. You ever have those moments? Maybe with your parents, like, hey, if you let me go hang out with my friends, then I'll do extra chores. Or mom, if you don't tell dad about that, then I'll help out a little more around the house. What about with God? Have you ever made a deal with God? Like, God, man, if you help me ace this test, I'm going to go to church. I'll start reading my Bible a little bit more. Or God, if you can somehow make sure that my parents don't find out about this, then I promise I'll never do it again. I think that it can be really easy for us to get into these kind of situations and really these mindsets as followers of Jesus where we think, man, God, if you would just do something for me, then I'll do something for you. I think it's so easy for us to get to the place where our worship for God becomes dependent on what we want Him to do or what we think that He should do. And so in moments or in seasons in our life where everything's going great and everything's going the way that we want it to and we're just winning in life, then praise God. Like, God's good, God is great, and we praise and we worship Him. But in the moment in our life when things aren't so great, or things aren't going the way that we want them to go or the way that we think they should go, then we're in those mindsets where, what the heck, God? Like, where are you? What are you doing in this moment? But what this even if faith is really all about, and what I want you to hear tonight, is that God is worthy of our worship when things are going really great, but He's also worthy of our worship when things in your life are not going so great, because Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He never changes, and so our circumstances do not change the reality that God is worthy of our worship. You know what's different? All right, like this theme of being different, you know what's different? Worshiping God in the middle of a storm. All right, like that's different. Or worshiping God when things aren't going your way, and when things aren't really great, or choosing to follow and love and obey God no matter what. Like, that's different. That's choosing an even if faith. Verses 16 through 18 of our story say this. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if He doesn't, even if God doesn't save us from this fire, even if my faith in God is the exact thing that gets me killed, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue that you've set up." No matter what, we are worshiping God. And come what may, whatever comes my way, we are worshiping God. How do we get to that place in our life? Or like, how do we become the kinds of people that have that kind of faith where we say, man, even if, fill in the blank. even if it feels like my life is falling apart, I'm still going to praise God and I'm still going to worship God in that moment. Even if I don't get what I think I should have got, or it doesn't go the way that I think that it should have gone, even if that happens, I'm still going to praise and worship God. How do we get to that place in our own life? I think that it starts by looking at the cross. Because the cross, and because of Jesus Christ and what he did, God is worthy of our worship. Romans 5:8 says, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That while we were still sinners, like while we were the enemies of God, while we were separated from God, while we literally wanted nothing to do with God, in that state, he still loved us and he still wanted us and he still wanted to bring us into a relationship with him. Like, do we really understand the magnitude of that truth? While we were still sinners, when you were at your very worst, when you went too far, when you made the biggest mistake that you've ever made in your life, when you felt the most unlovable and unworthy, when you've done something, whatever it is, in those moments, God looked at you and he said, I love you and I want to be in a relationship with you. And so because of that great love, he sent Jesus into this world to take our place, to take our sin and our punishment, so that we could be in a relationship with him. That's why he's worthy of our worship. Right? And that reality, that truth of what Jesus did, that never goes away. It never changes. Our circumstances don't change that fact and that truth. And so God, he does not have to do a single thing to prove himself worthy to us, because he's already done it. Like, he has already done it. God could literally not give me one more good thing, or do one more good thing, or give me one more blessing, or literally nothing else could go right in my life, but still God is worthy of my worship because of the cross. He took care of our greatest and our deepest need, and so he will forever be worthy of our worship. He doesn't have to prove himself. He doesn't have to earn our worship. He's worthy of our worship, and if we can remember that truth, then we can have that kind of even if faith that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had, and we can be people that worship God no matter what. That's really what this idea is all about, is how can we become the kinds of people that worship all the time and not just when it's easy. Here's my last point, and I'm going to go through this quickly, but it's your difference is a witness. Okay, your difference is a witness. Verse 28 says, then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise to the God of, so this is after the fire, right? After they come out and they're fine. King Nebuchadnezzar says this, praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's commands and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they stepped out in faith, and obviously God showed up in a really miraculous way. But now, in this moment, King Nebuchadnezzar is actually praising God. Right, like the same guy that refused to let them to serve their God. If we fast forward to what we talked about last week, the same guy that would eventually throw people in a lion's den because they chose to pray to God. Like the same guy is now praising God, and it doesn't stick, right? Like, it's not a true transformation. But in this moment, King Nebuchadnezzar, he stops and he thinks about God. And he praises him. And here's the point that I want you to take from this. It's don't underestimate the significance of living a life that honors God. Don't underestimate the significance of living a life that honors God. The way that you live your life as a Christian, it speaks loudly. And all of us, no matter who you are, where you are, or how old you are, there are people looking at you and to you. There are people watching the way that you live and taking note. Right, like, anyone in here have a friend or a classmate or a neighbor that's not a Christian? I think every single one of us, right? What if that person, your friend, your classmate, your neighbor, whoever, your family member, what if your life, the way that you live your life, the way that your life is a witness, what if the way that you stand up for what you believe in and live out your faith, especially when it's hard, what if that is the exact witness and encouragement and challenge that that person in your life needs for them to step out and take their first step of faith? Like, what if the way you live your life could be the reason that someone else in your life takes a step towards God and takes a step in their own faith? Don't underestimate the power of your witness. Here's the bottom line for tonight. It's choose to worship God even if. I don't know what that blank is for you. I don't know when that moment is for you that it becomes really, really hard to worship God, but choose to worship God even if. How can we become people that worship all the time and not just when it's easy? Be different and live differently with other people. Commit to worshiping God because He is worthy of your worship, no matter what the circumstance might look like. And remember that your difference is a witness. And when you choose to live different than the world, then people will notice, and Christ will be magnified in your life and through your life when you do that.